left channel. Yes, yes. So it's, again, one mic for both people. So 1 2 1 2 1 2. This is your left channel. Testing, testing, testing. And I'm guessing we'll be the same. It will be the same.
You tell me, we
Yes, I will.
same.
Channel 1, channel 1, channel 1, channel 2. Okay. Just sit on the other mic. So this is going to be your other mic. This is the other mic. Testing channel 1 1 2 1 2 1 2. Excellent, excellent. And yeah, next speaker will be here. It's using the same mic. 1 2 1 1 2 1 2 1 2 2. Okay. No worries, mate. Cheers. Thanks. Thanks, bye.
Did you know the just for I was trying to get some which is a bit of a problem right now, but I'm sure. I will bring that back. Chris has got, I think it was 50 instances on his thing, he had a gig in Westwood just for a day. I don't know what it wasn't nothing to do with me. Yeah. Because Digi don't know what it is. Again, Digi's two things, isn't it? Like this one, this is well, I asked that question. No, you expect to edit, like, that's a big shift. It'll take training and doing one proper text. And if we do that, we can't do that. That's going to take 2 hours. Yeah, but you can't do that if you like if you say it's a VT. Unless it's a big pre for the following week. Yeah, it's a weeks to do it. Yeah. But I think it will just decide. Yeah. But we need to know what we're shooting. The worst thing is they say both. But yeah, it was,
they asked me to.
first one did that really.
Yeah.
But you didn't edit it.
No, actually, it was.
And they took a nice job. It took me 5 hours from refeeding to, because we thought, by 9 at night, I had it 4. That's what my plan. And then suddenly popped up. They did a nice job. It took them an awful long time. I really like to see the stats on engagement viewership. Something that goes on at 9 o'clock. Yeah. Because of course I know that isn't really going to run to the next day.
Sorry, I just realised I'm going to kind of introduce where I don't want to have a shot. So once I've introduced it and hand it over to Tom. Oh, sorry. When I'm do you want me just to stand here? Am I out of the way if I stand here?
How are you going to, will they be sitting on the table where you introduce them?
Yeah, so they'll be sat on the table when I introduce them. I'll just say a few words to start with, hand it over.
Say a few words when you're basically outside there.
Yeah, and then
say a few words.
Move out of the way. Fine. I just don't want it, because usually I stand here, but I don't want to be in here.
The other way to do it is to be on that side and just walk around.
Oh yeah, actually, I can probably see. Try and avoid.
We can get 2 minutes. Because I think Sky just didn't take a live. We did it for live, so we can get 2 minutes.
They're literally, they're downstairs.
No, it doesn't matter whether it's intended to just get 2 minutes before it starts.
Okay.
Yeah,
What thing is, they'll basically go in the train, so I actually won't be able
Oh, I
to know
see.
where they are at the moment.
Okay.
But I'll try and give you as much of a warning
Yeah.
as I see them coming through the
Please, yeah.
No, you're back. Yes. It's up to you. I'll be fine. I've got 2 minutes.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah. So we get rid of that sort of constraint.
That constraint, yeah.
That can't exist now. When we do special work, that's a 12.5 minute to 15-minute quarter average. It's relative. And actually, quite often, okay, you might get 1 or 2 runs out and they get it so easily. Yeah. Special. It's all like today, something happens in the room. Oh, yeah. Everything.
So I saw that, yeah.
It took 3 days of travel.
You tell us something.
But something happens in the room.
understand the TV.
No, but that can't.
Surely more is better. As long as it's quality, which you call it.
Yeah, that's what we're after, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's quite funny, if you said shoot on premium tomorrow. I'd like to think that we always do. No, I'm going out to shoot shit.
It's revolutionary. That's
Well, physical.
Hello, good morning. Did that work?
Because I think the plan is we should get
Good morning, welcome to the NFU.
as opposed to turning the camera right.
yeah, not
Or using a phone that we can away from that quality. So everything we said, they take their slice at 9:16.
what happens anyway.
So which is what happens, and as you just said, they've still got the 16 lines they've all run it.
2 minute warning initially now. 2 minutes and we'll be able to start. Oh, suddenly goes quiet. I'm Jo, I'm the media manager for the NFU. Just a couple of format points to start with. We're looking at about half an hour for the whole press conference. I'll hand over to our panellists to introduce themselves and give a few opening remarks, and then we'll open it out to the floor. Obviously, we want to get as many questions as possible, so if you can keep it to one per person, that would be great. And obviously, introduce yourselves. And if you do have any questions specific to any of our panel, then please do indicate that as well. Great, I will hand over to Tom to kick off.
Well, first of all, thank you all for coming in, and I'd like to welcome Victoria, George and Jeremy to the panel as well. I think it's great that we can speak with one voice. For several months we've been trying to get in front of Treasury ministers. After the budget there was a flurry of activity that went quiet. And unfortunately today's meeting has been a disappointment, doesn't describe how I feel at the moment. The meeting opened with a comment, "I'm meeting with you because you asked to meet." Our fear from the start was that when this meeting was arranged, it was so the Exchequer Secretary could say last week at the debate that he was meeting with the farming industry. I stand here or sit here today speaking on behalf of the other farming union presidents that are in the meeting with the Treasury at the moment. He's drawn them from all parts of the United Kingdom, and there is no movement. The government resolutely believe that they are correct in the decisions that they have made, and that they are generous in the exemptions they are giving us. They don't care about the human impact. They don't care about the intergenerational impact. They don't care about the impact on tenant farmers. And the geopolitical situation that the world faces today, food security should be on the top of everybody's agenda. This should matter for 70 million people living on this island, and they don't care about food production and what this means for food production going forwards. So, yes, we are really cross today. And I hope that the government will recognise that there is still an opportunity for them to engage properly and meaningfully in moving forwards. What I think is really important for all of you to understand is that we went to Treasury with a solution. We recognise the fiscal hole that the country faces, and we recognise the challenges that the government are under. And the solution of the clawback was originally proposed by Dan Needle a couple of months ago. We've modelled that. We believe it's relatively revenue neutral. So when in recent days the Prime Minister has been out there saying that this is a choice between an inheritance tax and funding the NHS, we know that's disingenuous to start with, because this is £500 million, not over the £170 billion that it costs to run the NHS. But there is no choice, because we are offering them a solution that still raises the funds. But at the moment, the door is shut from Treasury because they believe, and the government believe, they are right. So the reaction from our members is going to be one of fury, one of real anger, one of desperation that we've seen over recent months. And it's what we all feel here today. I'm now going to hand over to Victoria.
I'm going to use this and turn it on. So, okay, it is on. I think that we went into the room knowing that we had a workable solution to everybody's problems. The clawback, which we set at 7 years, but would have been very prepared to talk about in the term of that. Could it have been longer? We went in with very open minds, and the four of us also to talk about every aspect of the industry, to make sure that the tenants and the landlords were represented. And I know George will say more about this in a minute. There are issues to do with farm tenancies which are just wrong. There is no way that they should not be re-examining how best to deal with farm tenants who can only claim business property relief, who don't have the assets to sell to meet that debt, and then have the chance of failing the succession criteria because they don't have enough money. It's just wrong, and the landlords for those tenants are very happy to raise our voices on their behalf on this. I also raised businesses. This policy is operating in some kind of vacuum. Apparently we don't employ people who will be affected by this. Apparently we don't employ other businesses to come and do work for us. Apparently the rural economy will not be damaged by this action at all. But we all know that this is a pebble in a pool. They talked a lot about the 10-year exemption from paying interest. I think they know nothing about how our businesses work. They know nothing about that year 6 cash flow crisis that you have, which means that despite this incredibly generous option the government have given you, you miss a payment. And that thereafter faced with a 9% interest charge on that debt. Very generous of the government indeed. So I don't think, I looked around the room and I thought, I'm not sure that there's anybody in this room who really understood when Tom was talking about what a balance sheet looks like. I didn't think there was anybody in the room who knew what profit and loss looks like. They were just adamant and deaf to what we were trying to say. And I think we all came out slightly with boiling blood about it, because we offered them a solution which has the same outcome, or nearly the same outcome as the one they're looking for in the clawback, which makes you feel that there is ideology running behind this. And I haven't wanted to say that before today. I've really not wanted to think that this is ideologically driven. But the money isn't big enough to justify the attack on our industry.
George Dunn.
Thank you. And thank you, Tom, for the opportunity to be... Oh, sorry, see this one. Yeah, thank you, Tom, for the opportunity to be with you at this really important press conference. So, one of the things which I said at the meeting today was that the 30th of October announcements were a shock, and they came as a bit of a blow to the industry. But we heard three things. We heard that they wanted to raise revenue. We heard that they wanted to find a mechanism to stop wealthy individuals hiding their wealth from tax. And we heard that they wanted to protect hard-working farm families. What I said, and I think what others agreed, is that they have introduced a system which makes the situation for wealthy individuals living in a high tax easier, because they haven't touched capital gains tax. In fact, they've increased the rate of capital gains tax and kept rollover relief in place. And they've allowed half-rate inheritance tax on estates up to £1 million. So what's not to like if you're new money looking for a place to invest your wealth to high tax? And they haven't done enough to help hard-working farm families. And I would venture to suggest that on this side of the table here, we've got organisations and professionals who understand a bit about the industry and can provide a framework for the government to understand how they need to be protecting vulnerable and hard-working farm families, and we don't believe that they've gone far enough. But we've offered the opportunity for the government to use its forthcoming technical consultation on trusts to widen out the scope of that consultation to look at some of those technical issues, but they were clearly unprepared and unwilling and arrogant enough to say, we've done all the thinking, we don't think we need to ask any more questions, job done, we're not making any changes to this policy. So it was one of the most unproductive meetings that I've ever had in my 28 years as Chief Executive of the Town Farmers Association, and that's no understatement. So the battle continues, because we do think that they have got this severely wrong. And for my sector, the tenant sector of agriculture, we are inundated every day with members of our association who tell us that their landlords are saying to them, quite reasonably, we're going to have to sell your farms in order to raise money to pay the tax that will be due, and therefore those farm businesses who Rachel Reeves said she was trying to protect are completely unprotected because they have no option whatsoever but to follow along with their landlord's tax planning situation. Thanks very much.
And now Jeremy Moody.
Yes, I'm Secretary and Advisor to the Central Association of Agricultural Valuers. CAV members act for and advise landowners and farmers across the United Kingdom. And we've done a lot of work on the data as to what the actual impact of this is, who it will affect, that to give a clearer understanding. Because points coming out from today are that the government is still not recognising that it hasn't got a full picture. The data it is using do not present a full picture of the impact of these proposals. It still will not recognise that there are a significant number of farmers, including those who are wholly tenanted, who can only claim under BPR and are outside its statistics. There will be people who are business partners, where land is not a partnership asset, who will be outside their statistics. And so it goes on. So they're undercounting the people who will be affected and underestimating the value at stake because of the guidance that's given by HMRC on how to report business valuations. The office, and indeed, look at the figures that the government actually itself relies on. They say those figures are robust. They're certified by the OBR. Go read the OBR report. What it certifies to use their words, is a high level of uncertainty about the figures. That's what the OBR says about the limited figures that they're using. Secondly, what we can clearly see here is a lack of understanding about how unincorporated businesses actually work, where they pass assets down through the generations. They often have been there for several generations, expect to be there for several generations. This, at the random moment of a death, and it could be a young death, it could be 2 elderly deaths in succession, multiple impacts at unknown times, that takes up to 20% of the capital value out of what that person owned in that business. I've been doing a lot of work over the last decade over how we actually have improved productivity, how we have improved growth in the rural economy, how we have the investment that we will need to manage climate change, adapting to that, the new technologies, investing in those for the benefit of the future, the reinvestment in fixed equipment to be more efficient. How is that money found? How is that money to be serviced if you take this value out either as an upfront capital sum requiring disposal of land, or preempting the ability to pay because you're taking almost all the farm's income for 10 years? Neither of those are attractive. And so we went in prepared with the big solution of the clawback, but talking about all the various issues. Those were on the table to be looked at without response. And that, I think, underlines what has been said by those who've spoken before me. We went with a solution and there was no sign. Having a consultation properly to understand the impact, how the reliefs they've offered actually fit with the capital values and incomes of the farms they will bear on, would be a very positive way forward. Having a more open mind to understand the world to which these measures apply would be a great way forward. Those we are happy to respond to, those we are already submitting figures and assistance, but it remains unaltered. And that is where we are at this morning. Thank you.
I think one of the most challenging elements for us is that there is this assumption that when you inherit a business, a working business, you become a millionaire. You don't become a millionaire that day. It's all paper value. If you decide to liquidate that asset, that is the day you potentially become a millionaire. The principles of good taxation are you should take the tax when the money is available. They haven't even looked at and modelled whether or not we can service the inheritance tax bill. And it just beggars belief that at the moment they are pushing on with this tax policy, which is going to have such untold consequences for the future of our members, but also for the future of food production in this country. And I thought their manifesto commitment that food security is national security was genuine. We'll now open up for questions.
Dan Whiting from Sky News. Tom, you mentioned your fury there, that there's no movement from the government in things like the 7-year rule and increasing the £1 million threshold. What's your message to your members and non-NFU members who we've been speaking to in their late 80s and are really considering their future in the next 13 months and their life in the next 13 months as to what to do and how much it will cost their family if they're still alive on the 1st of April next year? And what's your next step in this campaign? Because we saw last week some more direct action from a farming group towards the Prime Minister. Is that what's needed?
Look, on the first question, that is absolutely the most challenging segment of our industry, is the elderly who have no ability to plan, or the terminally ill who have no way through this. It's them that we have to get change for. And we made it very clear, or I made it very clear in the closing remarks to James Murray, that this sits on his head, it sits on the Chancellor's head, and it sits on the Prime Minister's head. They have to be able to live with these outcomes. We don't believe it's if. Tragically, we believe it's when. And nobody who's given their life to producing this country's food should ever be put in that position that unfortunately they've been put in by this change to government policy. It is absolutely morally wrong that they are facing this challenge. And if nothing else, for the government not to recognise that treating people in that way is unacceptable, they are going to get the repercussions from farmers. I mean, we've got our clear next step at our conference next week, but I don't think we know what to do next, quite genuinely. It's, we've done our best to try and work with government. We've gone in there today offering a solution, and yet they're saying, no, we are right, without any comprehension of how the industry really works. Yeah.
You asked what we should say to our members who are in those positions. I would say to them, please take advice. Please step out of your head for a moment and try not to internalize the decisions that you need to make about the future for your family and your business. Seek the advice that is available, because there is always a tomorrow. There is always a tomorrow. And it might be an expensive way through, but a way through can be found. It'll be painful, it'll be difficult, but make sure you get advice, you get good advice from people. Don't sit there and internalize it yourself. And we will continue to lobby the government and to make the reasonable case that needs to be made to find a workable solution for the situations at the same time.
On the question of tall trees, as we call them, which is our next generation, I can feel the pressures, but I also think it's my responsibility where it affects me, and to say to people that we must all go to those tall trees and say, we've got it, talk to us, we will find the solutions for you, because it can't be on them alone. So it's up to us, and that's, I think, what all of us are doing, is to protect our tall trees and to reach out to them and say, we're going to be fine, because that's what they need to hear.
No, you need more questions.
Emma Gassman from The Telegraph. Tom, you criticised some of the farmers who disrupted Keir Starmer on his recent visit in Buckinghamshire. And some farmers have come out today and said that the NFU are not representing a broad spectrum of farmers. Do you feel like there needs to be a change of tactics now? Do you think more direct action is needed?
I mean, what we don't know is what would have happened if that direct action hadn't taken place, and I can't tell you that. So we know we represent 72% of farmers in England and Wales, which is something that we have that evidence. I don't believe that backing the Prime Minister into a corner is how we get this sorted. I mean, I don't know about any of you, but if I were put in that position, it wouldn't make me believe that I'm going to change my mind. It would do quite the opposite. It would make me double down. I feel for those brave MPs that have broken ranks, that have had the courage to represent their constituents' views, those stories that they are hearing from their members. Now, how do they feel today? They had hope that this meeting was going to be a breakthrough. And so we're not giving up. I still believe there is an opportunity where if the government really wanted to come to a solution, we have a workable solution that we will discuss with them. But at the moment, the message was clear today. It was go away. And so it's now very much in the government's court, and we will have to see how members and non-members react to this. Yeah, sorry.
Ben Cook from Times. I was just wondering if you could explain the clawback mechanism you keep talking about, and how much money you think it would raise.
There's various different estimates, and I think that the OBR report itself recognises that even the current proposals are highly variable or unpredictable in the tax raise, depending on behavioural change. And I think that we would need to work through that in real detail with Treasury ministers to get to a solution. But the very core principle is that when you inherit the business, you don't have the liquid cash to pay the inheritance tax bill. If you decide to liquidate the business, then you do. And so that is when you should pay the tax. And that is the principle that I think we all believe would be a far, far better proposal.
Yeah, I mean, this is a question of not having the tax tail wag the business dog. It distracts the eye. If you're driven to sell fields out of a farm, you've got the same costs on the farm and fewer fields, less production, more overheads. You're damaging that. If you're having to carry the income paid out over 10 years, you're crowding out investment in the business, never minding anywhere else. Looking at the clawback, it says, well, if the heirs wish to farm, or indeed let the land out for somebody else to farm, that's splendid. The tax accrues, but become crystallised at the point at which, within a retention period, somebody chooses to sell. That's when money's available. That's a business decision. But in between, we have good business planning. We have investment continuing. We have proper business life running. Rather than having it cut short on the random date of a death, forcing a counter-business policy that appears to be the consequence of these proposals.
I think it's worth adding that this government came to power on a promise of growth. There's going to be no growth if there's no investment into our rural businesses and farms. And you can't invest if you're having to set aside cash to pay a potential tax bill which will happen on death with its unpredictability. So the clawback, it seems such a manifestly sensible solution that we have all, across the industry, we've all looked at it, we've all modelled it. Dan Needle, who they trust and believe in, has also modelled it. Why are they just slamming the door and saying, no, we've thought about absolutely everything. There's nothing to see here. We're not changing a single thing. And that is alarming for growth. Because why would I go to the bank, borrow the money, take the risk, lie awake at night on the back of it, knowing that that investment is going to be slammed on death? So it's an anti-growth tax, and it's an anti-investment tax.
So, two back, lady in the red, orange. Yeah.
Joanna Partridge at Guardian. Tom, what do you make of the fact that Rachel Reeves hasn't got in the room and talked with you either today or previously? I mean, do you feel like you'd be able to put your point better across? And after today's meeting, did you get the impression at all that there were discussions actually going on in the back rooms at the Treasury or what they could do, and you're just being told something different?
We didn't get that sense today. I don't think any of us got the sense today that, although I understand that MPs did have productive discussions, or they thought were productive discussions last week. So, I mean, that's why I think they had hope when we were going into this meeting. Look, I think we would all still like to sit down with the Chancellor. If the Chancellor believes this policy is right, if the Chancellor is willing to own the outcomes of this policy, if the Chancellor is willing to run down our rural economies, to risk the future of domestic food production, then the Chancellor should look us in the eyes and tell us that she's right. To date, she hasn't been willing to justify the policy since she stood at the dispatch box.
And before Christmas, she asked for solutions directly. Here we are with the solutions. Turns out she didn't want them.
Can I just add one thing to that? We haven't seen the Chancellor of the Exchequer. We have asked for meetings with the Chancellor of the Exchequer, but I was quite shocked to hear from a number of backbench Labour MPs who said they have been unable to meet with the Chancellor of the Exchequer to ask why she has done what she has done when they are representing rural constituencies. They were offered meetings with her special advisors, which I would think was a bit of an insult to the backbench Labour MPs. And they, the ones that I've been talking to, and I'm sure we've all been talking to, have been hoping that today would be a bit of a breakthrough in where we got to. So if she's not even prepared to meet with her backbench MPs, how are we ever going to convince her to meet with us? So it is an arrogance that she's not prepared to face up to the policy that she's developed.
Sorry, second line.
Ewan Murray from BBC News. Tom, you've described what sounds like a bit of a brick wall with the government. So what would be your advice to farmers who are considering disrupting food supply chains, either by going on strike or blockading supermarkets, that kind of thing, if that's the way that they could actually get noticed and get heard? And Victoria, what did you mean when you said that you think it could be ideologically driven? Like, what kind of ideology specifically?
So on the first question, public support is absolutely fundamental to pressurising the government. The public have done absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, the support we've had has been overwhelming. We must keep that public support at all costs, because that will drive the political support if we have that public support. So the retailers have done nothing wrong in this. The public have done nothing wrong in it. And yet I get the genuine anger and frustration that farmers are feeling today. but the public support is our way through this.
Following up on Tom there, it's often presented as a bit of a negative that only 65% of the food that we need in this country is provided by the farming in this country. I want to turn that one round and say we grow 65% of the food we need for 70 million people. That is a phenomenal achievement that we have in our sector. To go to the question of ideology, when I suggested there might be, my question was, why, if this is not going to generate more money, would you not want to listen to our solutions that protect family businesses and multi-generational businesses, which Labour governments in the past have wanted to protect? Would that be because it's driven by ideology? It was like I'd stuck a pin in a balloon. You know, there was a lot of restlessness about it. So they feel very defensive about that. It feels like an attack on our sector. Maybe if I was in a different sector, also under attack, I'd feel it as well. But actually we feel selected for pain. We've been asked to diversify our businesses. That is going to be taxed with BPR. We've been asked to work harder, to do more, to protect the environment, and on every count, we have stepped up for that challenge. And still, they're coming after us to try and get us to sell land. I don't know. You can speculate at the BBC about what might drive that.
Gentleman in the jacket? Yeah.
Sorry, Emilio from Politico. What argument have they actually given for rejecting this Dan Needle thing? What's the rationale that they give to you guys at these meetings as to why that wouldn't work?
But the premise is that they've been very generous with what they've done.
Yeah, they think they've simply said what they've said, and that's it. There's not a rationale for rejecting it.
So when you say to them, this is our suggestion, this is what you should do, they just say, sorry, but we're not going to do that. They don't say, well, we think this wouldn't work for whatever reason or whatever.
Yeah.
The line was, we've considered everything in great detail, and this is the most generous offer, and we're sticking to it. I think I paraphrase a little.
They've done it before the budget, actually. We'd considered everything before the budget.
Pity they didn't talk to the Secretary of State for data then, wasn't it?
It would be nice if they'd worked off complete data and an understanding of what they were doing. Sorry.
Ben Wright from BBC. I still, for 3 months the ministers have been clear they're not going to U-turn on this, despite the protests, despite the arguments you've been making. So I'm still not clear where your campaign can go from here. Is it the end of the road? You just have to accept that this is now the government's policy and it's coming in.
George.
It's not all open to the fact that he thinks at the end of the day. We are here making reasonable arguments around the need to finesse this policy to meet the 3 principles that were set out on budget day: raise revenue, protect working farm families, and deal with those individuals who are hiding their wealth from tax. We believe we have got sensible technical suggestions for how those 3 principles can be advanced, and we will continue to make those arguments until the legislation is on the statute books. So we're not going away, and we did say that to the team when we left. We're not going away. We will continue to make those suggestions.
I think the other critical thing to this is that we have the finance bill, and so the finance bill in October, November is the critical moment, and we have to try and get enough political support to be willing to vote against the finance bill. Now, I'm not underestimating the scale of that challenge, but when we think the impacts on our industry are as potentially damaging as we do, we're not just simply going to go away because they've said no again. We cannot go away. And so the work continues, and however boring this is for all those farmers that are angry, however boring this is, those backbench Labour MPs are still absolutely the route through this. And if anyone wants my advice, it is go and meet your MP. Take them the evidence of what this will mean for you. Go with your accountant, go with your consultant, and put forward your argument. Make sure the inner city Labour MPs understand about the impacts on food production. And that's the campaign we're going to have to run now, between now and the finance bill, is to try and get more backbench Labour support so that they are willing to pressurise the government ahead of that finance bill. But what, Lady in the Green?
Can I just quickly say, all politics is local. We'll get a really good sense at the local elections in May, many of which have been cancelled, about exactly what the feeling is at a local level. There's an awful lot of local government going on, and a lot of county councils have put motions through to support farming and the farming community. There's a lot of unrest about this out there, not just in the farming community.
But Lady in the Green.
Hi, it's Claire Alcott from the Daily Mail. Tim Bonner of the Countryside Alliance has referred to some of the changes that Labour are making about gun laws, and the attack on the countryside has implied that Labour maybe don't understand how the countryside works. Is that something you would echo?
We're focusing on how we get changes to the proposals to inheritance tax. We're treating this as a single issue topic that we feel undermines the future of our members' businesses and of the country's food production, and that is the issue that we're focusing on.
In order to understand, they'd have to listen.
We've got one more, Rachel.
Rachel Brown, Farmers Guardian. Given the remarks made by the Prime Minister last week on farming not being high on the government's pecking order and the lack of response from the DEFRA Secretary to those comments, in your opinion, do you believe Steve Reid and Daniel Zeitner are doing enough to represent the farming community?
It's their job as the Farming Minister and as the Secretary of State to make sure that farming and the environment is on the agenda of the government. If they have given up the hope that they can get it, make sure it is on the government's agenda, then I think that becomes very, very challenging for us.
Well, Daniel was there today in the meeting. I have absolutely no doubt that Daniel Zeitner is a good man. It emanates from him. He wants to listen. If anybody understands that the effect that this is going to have, it's who's in government, who has the ear of government, it's Daniel Zeitner. However, does he have the influence to make a difference? We were told, he told, in fact, last week, that we are low on the agenda, the government's agenda. Food should never be low on the government agenda. We barely hear anything about the environment at the moment. The environment should never be low on the government's agenda. So the more we can do to encourage him and Steve Reid to stick up for us, to be our voice, that is our only way to be heard at Cabinet at the moment.
I think that's all we've got time for at the moment. Did you want to say anything to close, Tom?
Well, I really do thank you for the support that we've had and the coverage that you're giving this today. It sometimes feels like it's a lonely battle, but generally the support has been fantastic, and we've just got to sort of regroup and dust ourselves down and work out what comes next. But we know that our membership will not let this go away. We won't let it go away, and as organisations, we are committed to working with the government. But they've got to be willing to listen. They've got to demonstrate that the leadership is not easy, but leadership sometimes admits you've got things wrong. And that's the leadership we need from the government now, is to recognise as an alternative path which can deliver growth, can deliver for food security, can remove the human impact, and can still critically raise the tax revenue. We're not asking for too much. We're genuinely not. There's a solution that can work for everybody and that can work for the government. And I urge them to consider whether what they've done today is really the correct course of action. Because time is running out and the industry is really in a desperate state about the changes that are coming.
Thanks. I think our panel is sticking around for a little bit. If anybody does want to catch up with them or follow up with anything after this, for any interviews with Tom, Lizzie at the back, and I, just come to us and we can sort it out. And then just to say as well that the presidents of NFU Cymru, NFU Scotland and UFU, I think once their meeting is done, is coming back here as well. So if anybody wants to catch up with them and get their take from the meeting with the Treasury, which should be, well, I think they're in the middle of it now, they'll be here as well. Yeah, thank you all for coming. Cheers. Is this...
Yes, before we say something indelicate.
I'm getting more online. So what were you trying to get me to do? It was Rachel's. It has gone out, it got auto, it had filled up. And,
yeah. Was that Rachel?
It was Rachel, yeah. Sky's message, you did what I was trying to get you to do.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Do you want to come to Sky now, or do you want to? Well, can I do a quick video at some point? We can. I think they'll do now. I'll do that first.
So, if we, I mean, we'll probably end up going at various different times. Let's just keep in touch, and we'll carry on from there. Cheers.
Treasury minister. The government position back in the budget last month.
It was something to meet about that.
Yes.
Yeah. Have the outside. Great to catch up.
I'll be around.
So, which bit do you think was the
Hello, the chance to meet you rather than just
I was just saying, what do you think sort of an acceptance thing?
I think there is no alternative. The consequence of what we talked about, the extent to which this rebalances the ability of businesses to be
like I said today, I've never felt
unincorporated businesses to move to a discipline compared to the community bar
all the other things,
and the institutional cooperative, the charity and the other both of them are extremely unaffected by this. And this, and in between,
Yeah, the lights will be coming.
at risk of an unplanned hemorrhage
Yeah, so the lights are planned for 20 past.
Yes, I was recording as well.
Yeah. Behind us,
Sure, no worries. Yeah, that's what we're
So it's not just me, it's the person who yes.
I think a lack of
So you need talk as well.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen the letter from Murray back to Alistair.
They do. And your earpiece or your
There are farmers who
This was the, from what he said, the implicit part of what he said was, other models don't fit their side to make their view fair.
how the arguments are
My
going to
view,
arrive.
they are absolutely this is not just personal gain. All these are expensive around, business asset. Minuscule narrow margins, there's expensive. And just that's why it's protected. This is a legitimate tax relief.
Yeah, there's a
I'm
charitable
happy
view
to
that
link up with personal
focusing
gain
the release on the people
because I
who
think,
deserve them.
why would they do
Detail to
that
understand what
unless
family
that's what
government
it is?
Or
Because the ultimate result is people say that it's the most realisable asset we have.
Well, and
You know, you
as I
can't
was
say
saying, we can not just by here.
otherwise you really can't
There are a number of
wine
conditions
in
where
order to make them sellable. You
just as
know,
we need case law is moving,
but every time
and there is a condition in which a number of
you lose land and you lose
a minority
farm business.
Yeah, and you mentioned that opening speech around
will actually have the notional amount of
conversation with
in their inheritance tax valuation.
tenants because they
So
are
more tax to pay,
a really tricky situation.
often no more real assets. So they're effectively a higher rate. And that's something, again,
When that kind of discussion was having,
Well, I think it's very interesting, you know. George and I speak a lot, we get to, you know, we are working on making land and viable. But what I'm so specific about it's a lack of humility. Here's a reason we don't know much about. Perhaps we should perhaps we should do a consultation before we go into this. I mean, Steve Reed is a
that's fine. Okay, we're going to do a couple of bits on this afternoon, so we can use that later on. Thank you very much.